Throughout the human history, we have fought many wars. Millions of soldiers were sent to the battlefields to kill and to be killed. One such war is the Kargil War, which was fought on the highest battleground in the world, under freezing temperatures and terrific weather conditions, needless to say, in our mighty Himalayas. The story starts after the India-Pakistan partition in 1947, when Pakistanis captured the Kashmir area, now called as POK. In 1972, the Shimla Agreement took place, which demarcated the actual line of control till Kashmir's point NJ 9842. Now, the controversy starts for the region beyond NJ 9842, which is the Siachen Glacier. Both India and Pakistan claim this glacier as their own territory. For the world, Siachen is nothing but a frozen glacier. But for India, Siachen is an important strategic location which separates Pakistan and China borders, helping India distance both the countries from directly accessing Leh, Ladakh and adjoining locations. In 1984, the Indian Army launched Operation Meghdoot and captured all the strategic locations in Siachen. Fast forward to May 1998. Both the nations went nuclear and were now a potential threat to each other in war situations. To ease out these tensions between both the nations, Indian Prime Minister Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee initiated the bus diplomacy in February 1999 as a friendly gesture, and both the countries signed Lahore Declaration to control the usage of nuclear power. However, many Pakistani leaders were not happy with these relations and they planned to launch an operation that could internationalize the Kashmir issue. Pakistan wanted to occupy high altitude posts in Kargil, Dras and Batalik sector and attain a dominant position to observe and capture the national highway connecting Leh to Srinagar and disrupt the only supply line to Leh and Siachen, thereby cut off Ladakh and Siachen completely from India. These intrusions would have given Pakistan control over substantial areas of strategic land by altering the line of control. In November 1998, Pakistan's four top leaders, along with Army Chief General Pervez Musharraf, launched a secret mission to capture Kargil posts without keeping their very own Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif in the loop. In 1998-99 winter, when the army left high altitude posts near the line of control because of freezing temperatures and waiting to settle back once the summer arrives, Pakistan Northern Line infantry soldiers dressed up as Mujahideen captured more than 140 Indian posts 10 to 15 km inside the line of control and 150 kilometers spread lengthwise, starting from Mushko Valley till the Khanubar region. Indian intelligence found out about these very late towards May. More than 5,000 Pakistanis occupied these areas, establishing positions on Tiger Hill and Tololing Post. Pakistan's artillery shelling troubled the troop movements on this highway and destroyed the Indian Army ammunition dump in the town of Kargil. The peaks in the Kargil district rise to altitudes ranging from 16,000 feet to 18,000 feet above sea level. The treeless ridgelines are vast and barren, made up of loose rocks with extremely low temperatures reaching minus 30 degrees Celsius. Ultraviolet radiation is 55% higher, which causes severe sunburn and snow blindness. Thin air and cold weather with low pressure reduces the amount of oxygen available to human tissues. Even the most physically fit men exhibit acute mountain sickness symptoms, including headache, nausea, muscular weakness, fatigue, sleep disturbance, reduced night vision, and loss of appetite. Soldiers must consume at least 4,500 calories and 8 to 9 liters of water per day to prevent weight loss and dehydration. In addition to the atmosphere, peaks and ridgelines expose soldiers to severe weather and restrict movement. Terrain folds hide enemy forces from aerial and ground observation and mask the effects of firepower. The limited availability of trafficable roads makes supplying logistics difficult. At high altitudes, aircraft engines produce less power due to low pressure, reducing maneuverability and limiting load capacity, which needs trained pilots to combat such changing weather conditions. Helicopters lose rotor efficiency in low air pressure, making hovering difficult and risky. Cyclic weapons deteriorate due to lubricant freezing and metal brittleness. Frigid air reduces the range of projectiles and alters the trajectory, which affects their burst characteristics. Pakistan Army, being at the top, had an added advantage, and hence India had to deploy forces in the ratio of 10:1. When the targets were difficult to spot, number of posts captured were not known, and there was no idea about the enemy strength with their arms and ammunition. Pakistan was easily able to aim and target Indian forces, cutting the supply line and making it difficult for the Indian Army to hold the positions in Siachen. The high altitude environment, coupled with Pakistan's skillful employment of surface-to-air missiles, diminished India's asymmetric advantage and exposed vulnerabilities. At the same time, Pakistan maintained a good supply of logistics and reinforcements across LOC, which helped them stabilize the captured posts. India feared the war going international if it crosses the line of control, which could also have activated the Kashmiri separatists, increasing terrorism in Kashmir. Nuclear tests done in 1998 also posed a threat of this war going nuclear, which would have devastated both the countries. India could use its air force for directly attacking the enemy posts. However, if Pakistan would have used its air force, it would have led to massive casualties on the Indian side, as the soldiers were deployed out in the open on the warfield, without proper logistics and no protection. Facing an unforeseen turn of events on the LOC, India chose to mount a military campaign and deployed local battalions whose soldiers were accustomed to high altitude. These units adapted quickly and helped to contain the Pakistani forces in the campaign's initial stages in early May. But most of the soldiers who rushed to the war zone from low elevations were unacclimatized and did not have special training or experience of high altitude. A drastic change in temperature and weather, along with minimal food and water in the initial stages, resulted in severe AMS symptoms and frostbites. Infantry battalions launched uphill attacks without adequate artillery support and firepower. The movement was slow and painful on rocky cliffs under intense fire. Most units attacked during daylight, vulnerable to enemy observation and intense fire. After 8 days in contact, the 18 grenadiers had suffered more than 150 casualties and had failed to take Tololing. Indian attacks on nearby Tiger Hill met the same fate. The Indian Army's initial campaigns failed because planners did not adapt military operations to the high altitude battlefield. The Indian Air Force air campaign also suffered early losses as it discovered its training and equipment lacking in the high altitude atmosphere. After losing 3 aircrafts to enemy fire in the first week of operations, it imposed height limits that reduced their ability to deliver effective close air support to maneuver units. They even had orders not to cross the line of control under any circumstances. Inaccurate unguided missiles and the limited sight of the Pakistani bunkers were a challenge. India was losing the fight against both the environment and Pakistan, and a change in strategy was essential to prevent the defeat. Thus, the commanders developed techniques for high altitude assault that featured small groups scaling vertical terrain. Massive artillery fire preceded all attacks. Elements of the Ladakh Scouts provided immediate mountaineering expertise. Mules importers formed a continuous line of supply between infantry units and their supply trains. Meanwhile, 2 Rajputana rifles planned to launch multi-directional attacks on Tololing post and surprise the enemy. The battalion requisitioned large quantities of cold weather gear for such weather conditions. Units initiated acclimatization and training programs that resulted in minimum high-altitude illnesses throughout the operation. Indian Army established ammunition and water supply points on each vertical. The battalion ferried equipment forward for 2 days before the assault. Mules carried the battalion's machine guns, mortars and ammunition up. 18 grenadiers still sitting under fire around the peaks and were unable to advance. On the night of 12th June, a massive 6-hour artillery bombardment helped the companies move quickly on both the axes of advance. Firing by 18 grenadiers allowed the troops to seize their initial objectives in a matter of hours. The shelling continued non-stop until soldiers reached within 200 meters of their objectives, where they picked up a heavy volume of fire that effectively suppressed the Pakistani positions. By early morning, the battalion had captured Tololing Top and beaten back several desperate Pakistani counterattacks. Two Raj rifles had given the Indian Army its first major victory in the war and provided the foothold to move forward to conquer the commanding heights of Tiger Hill. Tiger Hill stands 16,700 feet high and overlooks Dras. It is a massive terrain feature, approximately 1 kilometer wide at its base. Several peaks to the south of Tiger Hill provide observation of the surrounding valleys and ridge lines. Point 4460 is 1 kilometer south of Tiger Hill, within the supporting range of the Pakistan's direct fire. Infantry battalions advanced on unexpected and difficult avenues of approach supported by overwhelming artillery fire. Multi-directional attacks produced the element of surprise. Daring nighttime maneuvers over steep terrain in coordination with massive firepower broke Pakistani defences in all areas. On 3rd July, 18 grenadiers launched an assault on the Tiger Top that began with a 12-hour vertical climb using fixed ropes. 18 grenadiers could make initial gains, but assault stalled near the top under heavy resistance. Sensing the loss of initiative, 8 Sikh and a detachment of 52 soldiers climbed up the side of adjoining Western Ridge, splitting the Pakistani defense on the night of 5th July. The group held off several counterattacks. Most of the Sikh soldiers attacked without cold weather gear, and many of the wounded died from exposure. After 3 more days of heavy fighting, 18 grenadiers resumed the attack from 2 directions and seized Tiger Hill Top on the morning of 8 July. Pakistani soldiers had also occupied Balal Post at 19,000 feet, which is one of the highest points on the boundary that divides the Siachen Glacier. On 27th June, Indian Army started the 1800-foot near vertical climb to the top of the Balal Post and defeating a squad of Pakistani soldiers, thus occupied the position. As the battles on Tololing, Tiger Hill and Balal Post had succeeded, Indian infantry battalions eventually developed effective tactics for offensive operations at high altitude. Units bypassed Pakistani positions, cutting off their supply routes. The Indian Air Force air campaign against Pakistani supply lines further isolated the enemy pockets. Once isolated, the Indian Army attacked with overwhelming firepower. Indian artillery fired more than 250,000 rounds throughout the campaign. The controversial Bofors, with the range of beyond 40 kilometers, emerged as the Indian Army's most reliable artillery piece on the high-altitude battlefield of Kargil. Its long-range and heavy-caliber shell readily destroyed the enemy posts. Indian Air Force had supersonic aircrafts MiG and Mirage, which could target the enemy from the distant height. They successfully destroyed Pakistani lines of supply. Indian aircraft provided a psychological advantage and isolated Pakistani position. Israel also provided laser-guided missiles for Mirage 2000H fighters with precision bombing material, which limited the advantage of the Pakistani soldiers based on high position and helped India win over the situation. After nuclear tests done by both India and Pakistan, the UN Security Council condemned these actions and both the nations were put under sanctions that resulted in India going on the back foot. Hence, India decided to restrain crossing the line of control, which could have escalated the war further. India needed international opinion to be in its favor. India's goals regarding the international community were to convince them that India was a victim of Pakistan's aggression. Second, to demonstrate that the infiltrators were not militants but Pakistani army regulars. And finally, to demonstrate responsibility and restraint as a nuclear power. At the domestic level, the Indian government, particularly the military, engaged in public diplomacy, embracing the TV to control the narrative and rally citizens together. For the first time on Indian television, journalists reported from the front line and images from the war saturated TV screens. This rallied public opinion in favor of Indian action. The Government of India organized regular media briefings and ran advertisements in foreign publications like The Times and The Washington Post, detailing Pakistan's role in supporting extremists in Kashmir and to garner political support. The power of the Indian media, both larger in number and reputed more credible, acted as a force multiplier for the Indian military operation in Kargil and served as a morale booster. As the fighting intensified, the Pakistani version of events found little backing on the world stage, helping India to gain valuable diplomatic recognition for its position on the issue. When Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif went to Washington to meet President Bill Clinton on July 4, 1999, There was no international ally for Pakistan to turn to. Sharif turned to Clinton's pressure and agreed to withdraw the Pakistani troops from the Kargil, thus bringing the war to an end. The Indian Navy was put on full alert from May 20th onwards. The strategy was to put pressure on Pakistan from all sides by putting on a continuous surveillance unit near the Karachi coast line. As the defeat to Pakistan seemed a close possibility, the naval focus shifted to the Gulf of Oman, deploying all eastern coast fleet to the western areas. The Indian Navy strategized to block the Pakistani ports if the need arose. The former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif later disclosed that Pakistan was left with just 6 days of fuel to sustain itself if a full-fledged war broke out. The whole intent of Pakistan to gain an advantage in Kashmir was unsuccessful. The G8 nations, the European Union and the Asian countries condemned Pakistan for allowing its paramilitary forces to cross the line of control. Pakistan's all-weather allies like China and Turkey denied any support to Pakistan and asked them to pull out the forces from Kargil. Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif and General Pervez Musharraf passed the blame on each other, which ultimately led to the toppling of the government within 2 months after the war. Pakistan was isolated internationally and their economy weakened further. With this action, just after the bus diplomacy, Pakistan eroded its credibility and lost international trust. By the end of the war, India and US started having good relations, and US applauded India for not crossing the line of control, thus not going for an all-out war. Indian stock market shoot up by over 30%. Government spending on the military budget increased substantially. Using media and showcasing every detail impacted the mind of Indians, leading to mass patriotism and many celebrities pitching in for the cause. Operation Vijay was a perfect blend of strong and determined political, military and diplomatic actions that enabled India to transform an adverse situation into a military and diplomatic victory.